So you wrote in the book, back when I was a teenager, I worked overnights as a professional dominatrix in Manhattan. How many podcast interviews have you done about your book, Brutalities?
I've done a lot. I kind of like this vibe, so I have done like, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 10-ish probably.
In the interviews, do you find that people, having read your book or learned your story, are they looking at you sideways, or do they resonate with your story? How is it received?
I mean, I think myself and my publicist are both good at not putting me in rooms with people who are gonna be like that with me. I did do one, and I won't name any names, where I was like, oh, the angle of your interest is very clear to me here. And I am pretty attuned to that feeling, and I dislike it strongly. I can't remember what the question was, but that was an experience I had.
No,
but
whether
really
or
only
not
once.
anyone that's interviewed you has kind of received the book or looked at you in an odd way or sideways, or
I mean, I don't know what do you mean by sideways?
that, oh, she must be crazy.
Oh, no, I think there are plenty of people who think that. They just make like Goodreads comments about my life choices.
Right.
Yeah. No one has like maliciously invited me on a podcast to troll me. Thankfully. I know that actually does happen to people.
You wrote in the book about the male gaze and living in a man's world, and you said, growing up in Manhattan embedded me with an extra sense of sorts, one that's always maintaining awareness of men and danger in the vicinity, one that usually sifts the harmless from the frightening. And you continued, men have always looked at me. Part of this is just that I grew up in New York, a pedestrian shopping mall of girls milling about in a gaze economy. I wonder if men like this know how transparent they are, that we see and understand that they're looking for weakened birds with broken wings and quiet beaks, fearful and mute, easy to prey on. You're back here in Manhattan now. Do you still feel that way as you walk the streets here?
No, I'm old and invisible now. Yeah. Like if I wanted to pull it together, I could pull it together. But like on the daily wearing jeans and sneakers, and like I am invisible. And I have to say, it's really nice. Like sometimes it's a little sad, but mostly it's really nice.
And is that everywhere? In other words, in Arizona too?
You know, I go from like, I've got like a 3-point range from like, you know, being viewed or not, and I mostly dress down. It's same, like if I dress up or like dress for attention, like I'm sure I still get looked at, but like not like when I was young. When I was young, it was like you could wander out of the house in literal plaid pajama pants and some man would like grab you. Like it was like it was actually kind of horrifying. Like it was exciting and horrifying.
Do you think it's worse in Manhattan than in other places, or it's just like any city where there's density and like people who are
I mean, I think it's like the pedestrianness of it, because now I'm like, I drive a car everywhere, so I actually don't even I'm like speculating on the answer to that question. Yeah, but it's definitely something. And I think also like the culture here is more aggressive than some other cultures. Like we talk on the street, people aren't like passive. So I think that's some of it, but yeah. But I remember being in like Brazil when I was young and being like, this is scary.
So how'd you become invincible?
I think I've just been very lucky. Like truly. Like actually the more I think about it, and now having a child, I'm like, I was like really fucking lucky. I had a lot of privilege that helped a lot. And like specifically, you know, doing sex work for so long, like I've never had an interaction with the legal system around that. Like that's a huge barrier to, you know, pivoting in life later if you have had that. And like being white is the single biggest, you know, reason that was the experience I had.
Did you know the other women who were like working with the guy who like found you?
Oh yeah, totally. Well, it's so wild is that this space that we are in right now, like this is literally the block that the place was.
That's so
and
wild.
When I came here just now, I was like, is it? Because, you know, the city changes so much, and that was, I can't do the math right now, but a lot of years ago. But it was totally right across from the Armory right here. And yeah, so like we all worked, like there was like a there was a communal area like probably about this big that we all like hung out in, and we would just like hang out all night, and then we would go do appointments in like the private rooms. So it was kind of just like a coffee and cocaine clutch where we would hang out, and we all became very enmeshed. And that was like, I worked at a couple of different places before I worked for myself, and that vibe was different each place, but it was always like some version of that. Yeah.
Do you feel in a sense that like getting all this attention when you were younger, and then sort of understanding like what is brewing under the surface of like these bankers and these lawyers' lives, that like now that you know what it is, there's some sort of freedom in that, to like, not freedom, but like a liberating, like, oh, I know what that is. I know that raw underbelly, and now I can be free to live in a different sort of a way.
Yeah, I mean, in a couple different ways. And some of it is just like, I feel like, and a lot of, I don't know if it's like just dominatrixes or sex workers in general, but I've talked to a couple of friends where we're like, oh, like, do you still have like the goggles? Like, you can still like see. And it's like, yeah, like I can see, men are very transparent to me. And I think that's from like, you know, knowing so many men so briefly and so deeply, you know, like psychologically, I mean. But I had another answer, but you have to set me up again. I forgot the other one. It's going to come back.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I do. You're right. It did. So I do think that like I do not have a wild life now at all. And I don't desire one. And like, for example, that Miranda July book, All Fours, went like super viral, and so many, I'm 42, so like so many friends and just like, you know, women my age are like, you know, resonate with it so hard. And I'm like, okay, I loved the book, but like I have zero desire to go to a weird hotel room and like fuck a 25-year-old. Like I would rather like clean a toilet than do that. And that feels nice to be like, okay, like I know what I like now, and I don't need to be like pressing the intensity button so hard all the time. And it actually is such a nice relief. I did it during the years that to me felt correct.
Yeah.
I am too old for that shit now.
Yeah.
Like my back is tired.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, you talked before, I know we're going in different directions, but you talked about the importance of education to your parents and in your family. So what ultimately changed for you? Because you said you kind of didn't follow that mold, but now you're a teacher.
Totally. It's like the joke. Like, so everyone in my family, my father is a career academic, retired professor from NYU. My mother was an early childhood education teacher. My sister, public school teacher before she had her child. My brother-in-law, public school teacher. Like, it goes on. Yeah. And I always was like, I had such an aversion. I was like, I'm not telling people what to think. Like, I don't want to do that. My experience of being taught had not been good at that point. And it just kind of happened. Like, I showed up at graduate school and they were like, cool, you teach this class. And I was like, okay, like, okay, I'll figure this out. And then I found I had a good rapport with the students and I kind of liked it. And there were some things about my lack of training that I think actually made me like approach them in a way that felt like unexpected, I think, for them, that has worked well. And then I started building my creative business, really just like doing stuff for friends and people I knew that I wanted to do. And then I was like, I should probably charge for this in some way. And then it kind of grew from there.
So you talk in the book about your relationship to pain, and you wrote, just as some examples, when I was 20, I got my entire back tattooed. The first pain I paid cash for. I wanted intensity, something fierce enough to puncture the suffocating cocoon of numbness I lived inside. I like that I could take it, but can a spiritual hole be filled with physical acts? Where did that come from, the suffocating cocoon of numbness that you described?
That's the question. You know, I have never had an answer. And I think when I was younger, I feel like there were all these movies about like repressed memories at the time where I was like, something must have happened, you know? And I'm like pretty sure nothing happened, you know, in terms of like one catalytic event. I think it was like a lot of stuff that I was extra sensitive to, and some coincidental stuff, but I just remember feeling like that my whole life. And I think like you can call it depression, you can call it you know, personality or affect, but like that was a feeling that I don't have like a memory of like prior to that feeling.
So what age did you, if you can remember, did you feel as though, okay, I have this spiritual hole, the one you write about?
I mean, I certainly didn't have that language for it, but honestly, like as young as I can remember, like I remember being like 6 years old and this sense of like, you know, in 12-step people call it like dis-ease a lot, you know, like that feeling. but you know, I thought that's just like what being a kid felt like. And so when I was young, I like I always wanted to be an adult. Like I was like 10, I wanted to be 15, 15, I wanted to be 20. And you know, people would always be like, oh, like you have, you know, and now I'm like, you don't have to pay bills. Like someone else feeds you. It's so nice. Just fucking enjoy it. And even like, you know, I'm 18, I want to be 21. I wanted the freedoms. I wanted the privileges. And then I was so disappointed to learn that I still felt like shit. And then I had to also pay rent. Like what, that was not what I thought that once I was free of my parents' restrictions and the sort of like restrictions of being young, that I would feel great all the time. And that was not how it happened.
So at some point you leave New York, move to Hawaii, or before you move, what makes you think I want to be a metal worker?
Well, that was actually much before that, but I started doing metal work because my boyfriend at the time, who's Dean in the book, was a metal worker. And he thought I was just the most frivolous person to ever exist. And my job was like one of, you know, like he was like, this is what you do. Like you were not a serious person. And I was like, okay, if I do what he does and like do a good job, then it felt like a logic problem. I was like, then he'll have to respect me and then he'll love me. And so that's what I did with my entire life to make this man take me a little more seriously.
For how many years?
For 10 years.
Where is he now?
I do not know.
You don't know?
I happily do not know. He has a family and a child, and I think is like thriving, and that's what I wish for him. But I wish never to see him again.
Yeah.
The 10 years includes the move to Hawaii?
Yeah, so like my years doing metalwork overlapped with my years doing sex work, and then I basically did the same thing with the next career change where I like, you know, Venn diagrammed it for a couple years and faded one in, faded one out until the next one was solvent. But I didn't, my last metalwork job was like probably when I was living in Hawaii.
Did you feel welcome in that community?
You're never welcome as a woman. Like you're varying degrees of unwelcome. I mean, on the job site, I should say. Like that's not true for every person or organization or company, but like broadly, when you walk in, people are like, you know.
But did you have to go to school for training or?
Yeah, so the first job I got, which I got from a friend of my boyfriend's, gave me a job. I learned a lot there. They taught me how to weld. And then I got a union job, and they put you through apprenticeship training, and then they teach you how to like not fall off the building and shit like that, which is important. But you work during the day and then go to school afterwards at night for 3 years. So I did that.
So you wrote in the book, I never stopped feeling in my decade of metalworking, why are you here? They would ask. I heard it as an accusation, an assertion that I didn't deserve to be in a world of hard, honest labor. Was that said directly to you, or was that just a feeling you had?
It was a lot of like said around me, or like, you know, we worked in partners mostly, or like little team, like they call them gangs. And people would be like, oh, like we don't want her in our gang, it's not safe or something like that. Or like, I don't want to be partnered with her. So like they wouldn't say it to me, but they'd like say it to my boss. And the way it would usually be told to me, it was so funny because I just connected with an old friend from my union yesterday, and we were like talking about all this, but like it would always be like, oh, after they decided that they liked working with me and wanted to work with me, then like the funny story was like, oh, they had initially like said no way, and it was like their punishment to have to work with me. So you know, a lot of people that have just been doing things a certain way, like it's fucking men's land there. And I see how there's some niceness to that. Like you can act a certain way, and then like now you have to not do that. Like I see how that's a drag. But I don't have to stay home because you don't like that, you know? So it was like a lot of years of just being like, you know, I had for sure a lot of allies, but also like the general gestalt was like, we would prefer if you were not here.
But you said in the book that eventually you kind of graduated from the period of like namelessness in that field.
Yeah.
Did that happen or no?
Like, yeah, but not as much as I wanted it to, which was like part of why I think I became disenchanted with it, where I was like, I'm always just going to deal with so many assumptions about who I am and so much like, I don't know, like stuff about identity. Like I was like, this is like the job that I got so I could go to work and like not think about any of that stuff. Like if I was going to think about that stuff, why am I also out here in negative degree temperature on the fucking crane, you know? So yeah, I think I don't know. I think for me, like, that work was a lot about, like, proving something to myself about what I could tolerate in a lot of ways, like, very similar to the other shit.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I did it. I tolerated it. I'm good.